I don't know. Did you see the poll I put on LinkedIn?
I did. I didn't see what the top result was, but
Yeah. So
it,
the question was, are all NFTs a scam? And it was a
right,
very loaded question intentionally to see
right.
like what people would say. So obviously we're going to talk a little about NFTs right now. But I mean, what if you? I'm sorry for putting you on the spot, but I got to ask, what do you think of the results? I'll give you the
I
four
would
options.
assume
So
that a lot of
yes,
people would
no,
say
don't.
yes.
You think
Yeah.
so?
Yes.
Yeah, I was surprised. Here, I'll show you the results. So almost half of the people said that they thought it was a scam. So like, all of them, which is a pretty aggressive statement. I thought anyway, to say that all of them are
Yeah.
scams. And so
I,
a lot of almost the same amount said they're not a scam, or not all of them are a scam. Like 15% had no opinion or didn't know. So I was surprised by the results personally.
yeah, the lucky thing for me is being at a university, I get to talk to people about this a lot, and many of our students say that they're a scam, but that's largely based on the stories that our scams are reported on, right? So the non-NFT, I mean, there's a lot in the NFT world that never makes the news or never gets exposed. So it is kind of interesting that people would say that, but there's been a lot of negative stories. And I think a lot of it is what's the utility of an NFT and why am I buying it? And I think that's been, if you're just buying something to outdouche your friend, so to speak, then yeah, it's probably a scam on some level. Somebody's making a lot of money for doing something that's not very important. But artists can do this and do well. And I think what we're doing is a little different because we have some reason behind it. Obviously, I'm selfish because it's my company, and I would, if I said it was a scam, it probably wouldn't be well received by anyone. But I've been in
Our
the
company,
space.
Thomas.
Our company, yes, I have been in the space long enough to you know see a lot of weird things happen. And I look at events like NFT NYC and how many people were there. And obviously, just in that volume of people, you're going to get some scam artists and gypsies and hucksters and so forth. So it's that nature. But I have a lot of friends who are in Web3 and have actually done some pretty cool, legitimate things. So to me, it's not this cut and dry. But I think you have to take into account even crypto. A lot of folks right now feel that crypto is a scam, and not just people on the street, but big time thinkers and big economic powerhouses like Warren Buffett and Bill Gates and the Jamie Dimons of the world. So this is a sphere where a lot of it will come down to, at the end of the day, the more legitimate stories that we can tell and the more legitimate stories that can be shown, the more legitimate it will be. If not, and all you're hearing is scams, then you'll think it's a scam.
Well, my policy on NFTs, crypto, and blockchain are almost the same. It's like I love the technology. I don't know which ones are going to survive, but I think 10 years from now, there's going to be some very powerful players in all three of those spaces because I mean they're all based on legitimate theories, I would argue.
Right. And blockchain at its core will be a good thing. I mean, it'll add security and it will add integrity to certain processes right now that need them. It's not reached its it became a buzzword, right? And it hasn't reached that point where enough people are using it for the right reasons. And some people adopted blockchain very early and use it poorly. And so that made it bad. But I have a good friend who wrote a book called Blockchain Isn't Hot Sauce. And I think it's one of those things where every now and then companies adopt a terminology or something. I think the other one out there right now is AI. Oh, we're using AI. I'm sure you are, but you're not. You can't tell me why and how. And I think that's the same way with blockchain. People were talked into it. They didn't really know why they were doing it, but there have been some benefits. There was a great supply chain blockchain company that was really bringing a lot of security and integrity to the supply chain because it was preventing a lot of fraud that had gone on. So this is, yeah, and I see the comment there from this George Hilton. I mean, that's a great point. People, if you don't understand the technology, it's easy to get taken advantage of, right? And even for people who understand the technology, it's a complex technology. So if you view something, I think that's the way a lot of people view things. If it's super complex, there's a higher likelihood that something bad can happen to me. And really, if you look at what happened in 2008 with the credit default swaps and all that stuff, where people really didn't understand the underlying instruments and why, it was really easy for bad things to happen because no one knew where the money was going except for the guys that were really benefiting from it.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So you do a ton of stuff in startup funding and fundraising and crowdfunding and all that stuff. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I went to law school, graduated in 2008 from Michigan State, and um, shortly thereafter, as I mentioned, was let go from the government job I had and wound up as a securities regulator. And that was a great experience because you get to see companies raising money and what's going on, learn all the federal securities regulations, and very quickly went into that world of startup fundraising and capital. And a couple really cool things happened right around that time. One was the Jobs Act passed. So crowdfunding, equity crowdfunding became a thing that hadn't existed before. It kind of had, just not with that name. The second thing is states started passing crowdfunding bills. And for me personally, right around that time, I was also got onto the team at a startup. And so we were in the fundraising process, and it was a startup that was growing and eventually exited. So I had sort of a perfect storm of things happen. Wound up helping write a couple state crowdfunding bills, wound up being one of the few regulators that was pro crowdfunding. And I developed a passion for building companies the right way. Entrepreneurship is kind of like a sport at this point, a competitive sport. And
I
seeing
like
that I
that.
could get involved and offer a service to people. And really, I wanted to make sure that I'm a really optimistic person and I like to enjoy myself. I wanted to work with companies and let the founders of the company focus on the company, not focus on the fundraise and the stuff they don't want to be doing and the compliance, because too often fundraising becomes a burden on a founder who is a technologist or somebody who's trying to solve a problem, and they don't want to be talking to all these investor types. And the other thing I would say is I got involved on the other side of the table too, helping some angel funds as an attorney and helping build some funds. I wanted to help angels get smarter and better at what they were doing and more efficient at what they were doing, because many of them were people that were there because they had money and that was it. They weren't necessarily qualified to be looking at companies, didn't know what to look for, didn't understand the risk factors, and didn't really have a good, they didn't have a good thesis as a fund, and so helping all of that come together, especially in a state like Michigan that was a bit economically depressed at the time. So I've been able to live in this space. I've been with a number of startups, a couple as a founder where I've exited, a couple other glorious failures, and a couple where I was just on the team. And so it's been fun to see all sorts of things go on. I've used crowdfunding, I've used traditional angel, I've done the VC thing, I've done it all. And it's a beautiful ecosystem when it works, and companies and innovation, companies that actually drive innovation can go forward and don't have to leave the market they're in and go somewhere else. If they can stay where they want to be, it's great to see. So that's the other thing, is I'm passionate about staying in the Midwest and keeping it here in Michigan and other Midwestern states. And then I do some work up in New England area as well. So places that traditionally aren't that widely served by this market, but have a lot of great innovation, great universities, and could be sources and hubs of innovation. So,
Gotcha. So let's pretend I'm a startup off the street. Excuse me. I'm a startup off the street company. Will say, okay, I've got this idea. And let's say you buy in a little bit. You say, okay, it's not perfect, but it's probably like 30, 40% there. You can probably get it there with them. I say I say I want to raise money. What's your first step in your process? Like, how would you like consult me to figure out where to go with this?
my first thing is don't do it. My second thing is usually, what have you already done? What attempts have you made? Who have you talked to already? And who do you have, not necessarily on your founding team, but do you have an attorney? Do you have accountants and other professionals that are helping you, or people that can advise you around those things? And usually then we go into, okay, I haven't looked at grants. I haven't looked at pitch competitions. I haven't looked at any of this stuff. Okay, well, let's go see what's available. Is there anything in your niche? Are there any bank funding sources available? And I think there's something like 23 funding sources available besides going the venture capital route. Have you explored all of those and exhausted those and said, this is where I have to go? Then we kind of sit down and I ask some questions. How much do you need to raise? Why do you need to raise that much? Who do you want to raise it from? Who do you want to be able to reach out to? Like, do you want to be able to solicit, or do you not want to be able to solicit? What relationships do you already have? What type of return do you want to give? Are you looking for, an exit, an IPO, or are you trying to just build a nice lifestyle business? And I asked a series of questions about basically what's the plan with the business, and how developed are you? Do you have a real business model already built, or are you just a idea on a napkin? Have you built any technology? who else is with you on the team. That's always really big. So I begin just by asking great questions. And then I say, okay, based on what I've seen here, there's probably some angel investors and other types that you can meet. Or I say, you're not ready for that or not right for that. Maybe explore crowdfunding, and here are the types of crowdfunding, and go through that. Every company is a little bit different. And there are companies I say, don't raise money, bootstrap this, do it nights and weekends. And I always begin with the notion that I'm a bootstrapper at heart. I don't love taking money from someone else, because then I have to listen to that other person and get their opinion, which sometimes can be great. The other thing I would say is, what help does someone need? I actually was just on a panel in Traverse City, and that was one of the big things. They said, what would you recommend asking angels if you're a startup? And I said, what other help besides money can you provide? Are there intros? Do you have a network of professionals? If there's something you can't answer, do you have someone in your network that you can point me to that will have a conversation with me? And are there other startups that you know that I can then be in a cohort with or commiserate with when I'm going through struggles that may have some similar things to what I'm going through? So I like to take a very holistic view of the business. I think one of the biggest things is, when the going gets tough, this is something that actually came up on Tuesday in Traverse City. Someone said failure is a great way to learn things. And I said, I agree with that on some level, but I also disagree on one level. I played football at Kalamazoo College. We lost all the time. Failure didn't teach us anything other than, do I really have a passion for playing football at Division III level? Because this sucks getting beat up, but if I really love football, I'm going to keep doing it. If I'm just here to win football games and learn how to be better at football, it's probably not going to happen here. I'll walk away. And I think that's the thing, is, what are you getting out of the experience? Are you really passionate about the problem you're solving, or passionate about the topic that you're dealing with, in a way that when the going gets tough, or if other people don't believe, you can keep going? And I've seen far too many entrepreneurs give up way too fast. I've seen far too many entrepreneurs that should have given up that didn't. And everyone's saying, stop doing this, you're killing yourself. But they keep doing it. So having that holistic approach, and then also, can you mold that entrepreneur into someone who actually can fundraise? Because the reality, most people that are investing in companies are betting on the jockey, not the horse. And in a lot of cases, if the jockey is just not going to be someone that is worth putting time and effort into, it's not someone I want to be around. Not because I dislike them. Maybe I want to have a beer with them, but do I want to put effort into introducing them to investors or trying to get them to a point? And I've had that where I've pulled the plug on certain people and said, hey, look, now that I've seen a few pitches, I just don't think you're in a position to do this, and you don't seem to have the ability, so consider pulling back. And I usually walk away at that point. So
yeah, my inclination is to be a little bit more aggressive on the fundraise, in terms of, I love that when startup founders start talking to people about raising money, just because I think, as an entrepreneur, and I'm myself super guilty of this, I'll get in my head like, oh, this is such a great idea, it's going to kill them and take over the market. And I start talking to people like, wow, that sounds really stupid. Now I'm saying it again. So pitching is part of my process for going through a startup. A lot of times, like, as I pitch, like, well, that doesn't sound like, after I hear it, I can't explain. Like, after I hear myself say stuff, sometimes it's like, oh, I don't like that anymore. So when I get into pitch mode, it's like, all right, if they don't get it, if I pitch 3 or 4 people and they all don't get it, then I'm probably the one that doesn't get it, and I need to go back to the drawing board. And the other thing is that the one thing that's going to kill every business, if you run out of cash, you don't have a business. Sooner or later, you're going to die. So that funding is almost that the evolution of the marketplace, I guess. I mean, survival of the fittest. So yeah, I'm huge, but yeah, I agree with almost everything you just said there, in terms of like the 99% of it. Like, yeah, get in there, get in the weeds, see what's happening. Not all founders are built for it. I mean, I think and the passion is huge. If you don't have a passion for what you're doing, entrepreneurship can be a very tough gig.
Yeah. And people always talk about inventors versus entrepreneurs, or idea people versus entrepreneurs. But to your point, some businesses require cash. Like, there's just no way you can do it without money. And I think that's what's been interesting for me, is every now and then I'll meet investors that seem to think that we have an unemployed millionaire problem in the country, that everybody has millions of dollars and tons of free time. And most entrepreneurs do not. And they're raising money because they really need it. And that was one of the conversations early in my career, when people were not asking for salaries in their raises and not asking to pay themselves something. And I said, so basically, you're going to give up 3 months into this when you need dinner. Like, what's wrong with you that you're not asking that? But to your point, there are times when businesses, without cash, you're nothing, right? A car needs gas to move, right? And if people don't have that capital, they're going to stop doing it because they can't afford to, or simply the business can't run without it. So it's a necessary thing. I would say the other point to that is beginning the fundraise isn't making cold outreach the day you file your LLC paperwork. It's you're starting to go to events early on, months before you start the business, talking to people, building relationships, circulating it in your network, and trying to get out there and meet more people. And I think that's the other area where entrepreneurs are starting to get a little bit more sophisticated. However, they don't realize how early they need to start the process. If you're thinking about an idea, get out there, meet a few people, talk to some people that have invested in companies before. One, because they may be investors. Two, because they may point you in the right direction. And to your point, when someone's pitching, if the reaction is not what you thought it was going to be, it's always important to ask, why is that? Are you telling the story incorrectly? Is it a bad idea? Or, is there something else? Are these folks not getting it? And so all three of those could be possibilities. And sometimes you have a great business and a great model, but you're just not telling the story right. Sometimes it's a bad business with a bad business model. Sometimes the investors aren't the ones to get it, and you go to a different group. And I think anyone who's been in this space has stories of that company that's been out there pitching and pitched to 100 groups before they got somebody to say yes. And that group said, we get it 100%. And I've seen a lot of that where you're pitching something that's so new that maybe it's just outside the realm that the investors know, or maybe within an investor, the pitch you've put together doesn't give them the compelling things they need. And I would say whenever they're asking you questions, take those to heart and figure out if you're getting the same questions repeatedly, put the answer in your deck, because people are wondering the thing, just say it expressly. And that's the other thing I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs make mistakes on is somebody's asking you a question because they generally want to know the answer, not because they're a jerk. And remember that. And it doesn't mean they're going to give you money if you answer it, but it may be that you haven't answered it and haven't given them the groundwork to invest in you. Second thing is the number of times I've seen a group pitch to or somebody pitch to a group and then 6 months later go back and pitch to the same group. And the first time it was a no, the second time it was a yes, is pretty high because you've moved more along, gotten further traction, or began to be able to tell the story a little bit better. So I've seen a lot of that too. And entrepreneurs have to be people that are good at taking feedback and good at growing as they tell the story.
Yeah, Tom, so I want to go back to one of the points you made that I think is huge and very underemphasized in this world. And that's the need for founders to take care of their own finances and bills. And it's almost taboo. It's funny. I've dealt with this for a lot. I've dealt with startups and being an entrepreneur for longer than I'd like to admit at this point, over 2 decades. And it's always been a stigma almost that the founder should be paid something out of the fund. And it's just like, I don't know who these people like. I do both sides. So I have the fortunate blessing of being able to be an investor and a fundraiser entrepreneur. So I've seen both sides of it, and I've been on high ends and low ends and medium ends of like personal earnings or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do people expect to survive? And the founders don't think that, they're scared to ask for it. Investors get mad about it. I hate that. It just drives me nuts. And I wish there was a way to kind of solve that. There's not really a silver bullet, but just get over like these founders. Most of these people are young. Most of them don't have a lot of savings. Most of them are working another job at least to pay their bills to get to a certain point. Not to say you give someone 50 grand just because they have an idea, but at the same time, some milestones and things like that, and some sort of earnings potential before it goes to become $1 billion company.
Right. Well, and I think, it's interesting that, investors should be rooting for their companies to succeed, right? And part of that is if you have an entrepreneur that's completely burnt out and mentally unstable because of that burnout, their chances of succeeding are that much lower, right?
Does
And
it
I
show
think,
that bad, then that burnt out and that frazzled
well, no,
around?
no, I'm not saying you, but I've seen it so many times where, and obviously I run a student accelerator, right? So I'm dealing with students who, are wearing a lot of different hats and doing a lot of different things. And I always laugh and somewhat at the notion that, oh, go work a little bit harder. Yes. And when I die of a stroke in my sleep because I've had too many 5-hour energies, is that gonna help or hurt your investment? But the other thing I would say to that point is that if you're unable to fully invest in your business personally, who is? And that's the thing that I think entrepreneurs, the more time they're doing something else, the less time they're spending on the business. And I've gotten into, I've worked with a number of different systems. Right now, we're using traction tools in the EOS kind of thing with one of our equity partners. And it's pretty interesting to see if you're not able to follow those the metrics that you're setting or track those things and put time and effort into them, they're going to go away. And you're going to feel like the metrics are punishments, not things that you should be working towards. And I think for me, I just remember I was an athlete. I was actually a better rugby player. You have to set goals, be able to accomplish them, and you have to have the time to work towards those goals. If all you do is show up to rugby practice 2 days a week, because that's what rugby teams practice, you're never going to get better. You have to be lifting weights outside of practice. You have to be running and training, and you have to be watching rugby on TV to learn the skill set. You have to be building relationships through teammates and hanging out. And the same thing with football in college. It wasn't like if you played 9 games, the season ended, you went home. You kept working out and doing stuff. So you need the time to put into your business outside of that 9 to 5, period. And that's when a lot of work gets done. And if you're unable to do that because you're working the night shift at Arby's or, like moonlighting in other capacities, and I've always moonlighted, and I'm sure, I know enough about you to know that you're always probably moonlighting the same as me. Like when you have a professional degree or a professional designation, CPA, lawyer, whatever, you can go work 20 hours a month doing something else. It's not that hard. But when I see entrepreneurs just burning themselves out, working a side gig and side hustles, there's a predictable failure right there. Even if they're really good at what they do, and even if their company is a great idea, at some point they're going to get to the point where it's just not worth it. They're killing themselves. So, you see the comment, the mentally ill CEO. It's true. I mean, I don't mince words. I see a therapist. I'm on some, I'm on, I think it's called Lexapro. So I take some anti-anxiety stuff, and the reason why I'm not afraid to say that is it's important. It's important to not be mentally ill, but if you have some mental things, go talk to somebody, deal with it. But I have the luxury of the time to do that. If I didn't have the luxury of time to do that, I've been in situations where, man, this is bad. Like it's affecting my relationships outside of my startup. So yeah, whole different.
Entrepreneurship could be a lonely world too. There's a lot of support groups, like EO was fantastic. I love my experience there. There's YPO, there's Tech. I think it's Vistage now. I'm dating myself again, but yeah, all great groups in terms of that stuff. So so I'm going to ask a very geeky question for my benefit as much as everybody else's. Is that it seems like the convertible note's been out there forever in terms of a fundraising tool. And I know it's one of your preferred options from our discussions before. So can you kind of talk about why you like that and why it's a good option for a lot of startups?
I mean, it's a legal contract, right? So do I like it that much? No. I think in the Midwest, all you're going to see are convertible notes or safes, to be honest with you. And safe is still new for us. It's not new in other places. I think the convertible note's just straightforward. It's simple. It's easy to understand. I still find myself explaining it to a lot of people. I actually just helped a guy out recently with a convertible note. And I remember meeting with an 84-year-old who kept asking me, so this is private equity, right? And I was like, no, I don't know what you mean by that question anyways, but it's straightforward. It's simple. And I think for a lot of people, it's just beneficial enough for the entrepreneur, but it's also just beneficial enough for the investor, right? If the thing takes off, both sides are going to benefit. And that's true of a safe as well. And I think in the startup world, what you want to avoid, straight equity is like the worst thing. I've done it a couple of times and I hate doing it for other people. Unless they're going to give something back, right? And these people that early on give up more than half their company, and then they realize that they're the one getting diluted as they succeed. At some point, they're like, "Oh my gosh, that's crazy." It's just convertible note makes sense, right? It's essentially a loan. People understand loans, they understand interest rates, they understand what's going to happen. And if you just succeed and you don't go gangbusters, they're still getting something back. They're still benefiting from it. And if you fail, you fail. And I think the people that are getting involved with angel investment are used to failing, and convertible notes make it pretty easy that, hey, this is what's going on. We missed our mark. The company's going out of business. Here's what happens. It's pretty straightforward. So it really benefits everybody. And obviously they're written with the intent that you're going to succeed. So to me as a lawyer, they're simple. They're easy to do. You can literally find most of the documents online and use boilerplates. So you don't even necessarily need an attorney to draft one. I still recommend it just because you don't want to have anything bad in there. And I've seen notes that go bad, but that would be my take on it. It's just simple, it's straightforward, it's tried and true. And in Michigan or other parts of the Midwest, if you're not raising a convertible note, you may not be taken seriously. A lot of investors don't want to do that. So what I would say is safes are becoming more vogue here in the Midwest, but I haven't seen them. I have seen some angel groups actually say we will not invest on a safe. We'll only look at convertible notes.
Can you discuss the difference between a safe and a convertible note? And I know safes, I think they originated from Y Combinator, didn't they?
Yeah, they're not super drastically different. The one thing I would say, I don't want to get too technical. And honestly, I haven't worked enough with safes to really be that knowledgeable. I've done it, but usually under the gun. What I would say is convertible notes can sometimes be very entrepreneur friendly or very investor friendly and leave one of the other sides at a disadvantage, where a safe has been more viewed as being friendly for both parties, regardless of what happens, right? Either way, if we succeed, everyone comes together. I don't necessarily buy into that. I think they all have their holes. Obviously, Y Combinator is very entrepreneur forward because that's their gambit, right? They want to be fully forward on that. So what I would say is really what you're looking for with a safe. I think one of the other big differences is not everybody who gets into a convertible note wants equity of the startup at some point in time. Sometimes they want to be exited at the point when you go beyond that seed round and into your series A, B, C, and so forth. So there are people who are like, I only want to be at the early stages, where safe people tend to want to be around a little bit longer. And I was actually just laughing. I was talking to an angel and they said, I wish at every conversion, we got bought out, because it would be a lot better for our fund. Because they're looking for a higher turnover, right? So they can go back and look at other early stage companies. Whereas people that are looking at safes aren't always looking for that. They want something that's going to be going towards an IPO or something that's going to be going towards a big acquisition. And not every company is on that track, nor should they be. So I think, also whenever you're looking at how you're going to raise money or what documents you should use, I think you need to have a serious conversation about where you want to go and where do you want to be in 5, 10 years, 2 years. If you're like me, like, let's get rid of this in 2 years. How quickly are you moving towards whatever that goal is? And I've been with startups that the goal was get to IPO. None of them got there. I've been with others that the goal was acquisition. We got there, and others that said we want to run this business for the next 50 years until we die. And all are perfectly valid things to say, but you have to know kind of what you're getting into at the start.
Yeah, statistically, very different percentages of success outcomes of those three you just said, obviously.
Sure.
So how do people enjoy the upside in the safe or a convertible? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, generally, either way, the goal is that the company gets acquired or gets further funding, and the valuation of the company keeps going up. So if you get equity in a company that's valued more than it was when you put in, that's good for you, right? And if those companies get acquired eventually and you've converted into equity, you'll get a chunk of whatever that acquisition is, which is definitely going to be more than what you put in. So I think that's the goal. And in the startup world, I think nowadays, really, you're seeing a lot of companies like to acquire companies because startups they're building something that they don't, maybe it's a feature they don't have that they could add. And instead of building it themselves, let's just go buy this company, and they've already got a book of business and so forth. My dad was an Oracle guy, and Oracle is always buying little companies that started out with something and said, hey, we're going to acquire this product. And, that's, my dad left Oracle, then kept getting acquired again by them. So you see a lot more of that. I think that's the big score. IPO certainly can happen as well. I just think it's pretty rare, that's going to go, depending on what you mean by IPO, of course. The other side, of course, is if the company succeeds, but it doesn't go gangbusters and it just starts paying back as a note, you get your money back with some interest, just like it's a loan. And that's not a bad outcome either. It's not it's not the 10x return. It's not the big sexy return, but it's okay. It's a good return on your funds in exchange for taking a risk. So, and you get to buy in the conversion, you get equity at a discount. So it's kind of nice because you get a decent chunk of equity generally when that happens.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's talk about Varsity Gems now. What's going on with that? You decided to get back in the startup mix.
Yeah, it was sort of so my oldest son is a college student athlete. He's at Oakland University. He's won 3 conference championships. He's also been in the NCAA regional, so pretty accomplished. I coached AAU basketball, and I have kids that have played everywhere from Division I down to junior college, every level in between. And I myself was a college football player. So about a year ago, there was this thing called name, image, and likeness that went live. And for a lot of student athletes, it was the first time they could make money off of what they were doing in college sports. And months before that, we all knew it was happening, right? So I kind of dove in headfirst at the urging of my son and some of the kids I had coached, saying, "What is this?" Got to know the space. And my dad, in his retirement years, is working for a company called McFadden Digital, who happened to be sponsoring a project at Dartmouth, where they were going to talk about NIL and in the context of NFTs. That wasn't initially the subject matter, but that's what happened. And so we spent the fall of 2021. It was myself, Tom McFadden, the CEO of McFadden, and a guy named Dr. Peter Evans, who's at the Platform Strategy Institute out of MIT, with the three, actually there were originally four. One of them we never saw, but they were MBA students at Tuck, which is, one of the top MBA programs in the world. And they wound up producing a research report saying that NFTs in college sports were a great idea, with the caveat that it has to be low cost and or free up front for the student athletes. And there has to be a way for the athletes to benefit and it to be pretty easy. Like, we don't want it to be just people with, that are hardcore crypto enthusiasts buying these things. So we launched Varsity Gems, and the basic gist is we use a process called lazy minting, where the student athlete can actually basically create NFTs for free up front. And then the only time it actually gets minted when somebody buys that, and they can buy it with crypto. They can buy it with a debit card. They do have to create a crypto wallet to properly access them. But we created a full marketplace using McFadden's technology. McFadden's built, if you've shopped online, you've used their technology, whether you know it or not. Major retailers across the globe, they're a global company. You've used it. They're a big Oracle integrator. So they helped us build the marketplace. We did a beta run around March Madness with some smaller schools. And our ethos is we want to put as much money as possible back in the hands of student athletes. What I say is my background, one, I had literally teammates. My two college roommates were from inner city Detroit and inner city Houston. Practice would end after the cafeteria closed. They didn't eat until breakfast the next day. We got called the Breakfast Club because we were the only three people at breakfast most days. I was a rich kid, so if I did get to go to the cafeteria, I went to Burger King or Jimmy John's, whatever. Well, they didn't. Second thing I'll say is a true story. One of the kids I coached, probably one of the most raw, talented kids, could have gone on to play pro in Europe or something, probably not the NBA, but went to college, got a full ride scholarship, but that was it. And outside of that scholarship, he had no money. His clothes were the clothes the team gave him, the sweatsuits and all that the team gave him. And he had a miserable experience, came home after a year, and now he has two kids and is a workaday world kind of guy. Great. But that's a sad story where he literally dropped out of school when he could have had more potential. And then I saw kids make choices about college where they couldn't afford to go to a small D3 school like I went to, which was more academically focused. And so we had students saying things like, I want to go be pre-med at this school, but I can't afford it. So that was the impetus behind this, is let's put money in the hands of the student athletes themselves. So 75% of our proceeds go directly to the student athlete. We help them market it to the alumni, friends of the program, and also their friends and family. We've got a few hundred athletes signed up. It's going really, really well. We now have athletes literally reaching out to us. We're focusing outside of the big time. So we have a couple Big Ten athletes and prominent folks, but a lot of D2, D3 athletes and smaller college athletes, and also athletes in sports that are outside of the big time, baseball, hockey, and so forth. So our first big score was a player who's already been drafted by the Red Wings and is playing college hockey. And he's actually meeting with our designer this week to design the NFTs and put them out. And then we're going to do some work with some other hockey players playing in the World Juniors. And then a big push with baseball players during the College World Series. We had guys that, it was cool for me because I was on Instagram messaging guys that I was watching on ESPN. And then a bunch of football players in the run up for the fall. And Dartmouth there's still some students studying the project. So we still have some backing from Dartmouth. And Tom McFadden is an advisor. One of the Dartmouth MBA students who's now graduated is still an advisor. And Dr. Evans, we're approaching him to be an advisor. So So it's really a cool time, and I think student athletes now are really understanding their rights and understanding what they have to do, and the schools are starting to get more open to NIL. So it's a good time to, um, you know, be in this space, and it's a lot of fun. And I mean, literally, it's fun now. I have 2 student interns that are current student athletes. When they reach out to athletes, their response rate is so high. It's phenomenal to watch because they are talking the same language, and the kids are excited about it. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Obviously, I'm involved at this point too. So if anyone watching this video has any interest in investing time or money into this project, please reach out to me and we'll connect the dots and see if there's anything there that we can do with you. So Thomas, I really enjoyed our conversation today. It was a
Yeah,
pleasure,
thanks for having me.
and we'll have to do it again soon. And obviously, you're working with Omega now a little bit, so we're going to start bringing you into some businesses and the legal side. So very excited
Yeah.
to be working with you.
Yeah, I'm excited as well. This is great, and thanks for everyone who attended. It's always fun to I actually see someone I know on there, so that's cool.
That's awesome. All right, I
Yeah,
will be in touch.
yeah.